folks. This is a PowerPoint presentation reviewing the Modern Language Association's punctuation rules. This information comes from the 7th edition of the MLA Handbook, which was published in 2009. We will begin with a statement from the MLA Handbook regarding the purpose of punctuation. The primary purpose of punctuation is to ensure the clarity and readability of writing. Get this, punctuation clarifies sentence structure. That's why we study punctuation, we practice punctuation, we use punctuation, because punctuation clarifies sentence structure. We begin with end punctuation. A sentence can end with a period, comma, a question mark, comma, or an exclamation mark, period. Since this is a PowerPoint presentation looking at punctuation, I will try to voice the punctuation in the PowerPoint slides. The idea is we want to start training our eyes to see the punctuation in a written text. So, end punctuation, a sentence can end with a period, comma, a question mark, comma, or an exclamation mark, period. Periods are used to end declarative sentences, period. Question marks follow interrogative sentences, period. Exclamation marks indicate emphasis or excitement, semicolon. They should be used sparingly in academic writing, period. Since exclamation marks indicate emphasis or excitement, we try to use them very rarely in academic writing, because academic writing seeks a more formal, a more professional, even, objective tone. So, in academic writing, we use periods to end declarative sentences, and we use question marks to follow interrogative sentences. There are other uses of periods in our English composition. Quote from the Modern Language Association's handbook, quote, "The trend in abbreviations is to use neither periods after letters nor spaces between letters, period," end quote. AD, BC, BCE before the Common Era, BA standing for Bachelors of Art, the MLA stands for the Modern Language Association, IVC stands for Imperial Valley College or Irvine Valley College. The trend by publishers of large volumes of books is to use neither the periods after the letters nor the spaces between the letters when you're publishing a book of 100,000 copies or more. Those little periods and those spaces create a lot of ink and they create extra pages. So by getting rid of the periods, taking out the spaces, we're able to save ink and cut down on the amount of paper we're using. However, with all of that said, abbreviations that end with a lowercase letter should still have a period. Association can be abbreviated ASSOC period or ASSN period. In both cases, the abbreviation ends with a lowercase letter, so we still use a period. English is abbreviated ENGL, lowercase l, period. Introduction is abbreviated INTRO. The O is a lowercase letter, period. Period continued, CONT, period. The T is a lowercase t, so we use a period. There are exceptions. The main exceptions are when the capital letters designate a personal name, or when the letters represent different words. In the first case, Rosemary Dean and Marie Ponsot have written a book on English composition called Common Sense, What to Write, How to Write It, and Why. Rosemary Dean and Marie Ponsot are the authors of that book. We use the capital letter of R for Rosemary. We still use a period. We use the capital letter of Marie, and then we use a period because the capital letters designate a personal name. Dr. James Patterson and Dr. Michael Human would be capital J period Patterson, capital M period Human. And then E period G period is the abbreviation for exemplar gratis. It translates from the Greek as for example. A period M period is for the morning hours, ante meridian. P period M period, again, stand for the afternoons, post meridian. You will find in some publications nowadays there's a new trend to not use lowercase am or pm, but to use capital letters am and pm. And then there's no need for the periods, as we just saw on the previous slide. However, for me as a reader, when I see AM capital letters or PM capital letters, I feel like the text is yelling at me. Comma rule number 1, this is the comma rule number 1 in the MLA handbook. For those of you who are transitioning to APA for the university academic writing, this is still a comma rule. It's comma rule number 3 in the APA book. Comma rule number 1, we use a comma before a coordinating conjunction joining independent clauses in a compound sentence, period. Some of my students have been told in junior high, high school, and perhaps even college, you do not need that comma. If you are writing to MLA format, that comma is comma rule number 1. And if you are writing in APA format, that comma is comma rule number 3. So if you've had past teachers who have told you you don't need that comma, please know that MLA and APA formats both still require that comma. The Senate passed the budget, comma, and the governor signed it, period. Good writing is necessary for success in college, comma, and good punctuation is necessary for good writing, period. I want to take a break from the commas for a moment and look at the semicolon because it still deals with compound sentences. We use a semicolon between independent clauses, that is, simple sentences, when we're putting them together into a compound sentence. We use a semicolon between independent clauses not linked by a coordinating conjunction, period. Good writing is necessary for success in college, semicolon, good punctuation is necessary for good writing, period. Compound sentences demonstrate a relationship between the two or more independent clauses, semicolon. Therefore, comma, there must be a clear connect or the reader will be lost. Okay, let's get back to commas. Comma rule next. We use a comma to separate words, comma, phrases, comma, and clauses in a series, period. This is a quote from the MLA handbook, quote, use commas to separate words, comma, phrases, comma, and clauses in a series, period, end quote. Some of you have had teachers in the past who have said you don't need that second comma. Since you have the word and, you do not need that second comma. All right? Look at the screen. It's a quote from the MLA handbook. We use commas to separate words, comma, phrases, comma, and clauses in a series of 3 or more. Got it? That rule is also in the APA handbook. So remember to put that comma in. All right, comma continued next. We use a comma in a date whose order is month, comma, day, comma, and year, period. The example, the Mayan calendar predicts that the world as we know it will come to an end on December 21st, comma, 2012, period. We need the comma between the day and the year to separate the numbers. However, in the United States, we're about the only ones that still use month, comma, day, comma, and year. The MLA preferred format is the international code, which gives you the day, and then the month, and then the year. So the format would be 21 December 2012, period. We don't need a comma to separate the day and the year because we have the month to do so. And since this is 2016, it's fairly obvious that the world did not come to an end in 2012. Next comma rule. We use a comma after a long introductory phrase or clause. Counting on his fingers, comma, Dr. Patterson suggested that 4 or more words would make an introductory phrase or clause long enough to require a comma. Let's talk about the quotation mark. Quotation marks are used in pairs. They identify words in your text which are quoted directly from some other source. Period. The words marked with the quotation marks must be quoted exactly, word for word, letter for letter, mistake for mistake, verbatim from the source. So, Patterson noted that, quote, periods and commas are always included in the quotation marks. Period, end quote. If we put the end quote after the S in marks and then the period or perhaps a comma is kind of stuck out there all by itself, naked and alone. So we include the commas and the periods inside the quotation marks. All other punctuation marks are included in the quotation marks only if they are part of the quoted material. Period. Quotation mark, is that clear? Question mark, close quotation mark, asked Dr. Patterson. Period. Notice that is that clear, which is the quoted words from Dr. Patterson, is a question, and therefore we include the question mark in the quoted material. But the fact that Dr. Patterson asked a question is a statement, and so at the end we have a period. This is a declarative sentence. Please also note that we have abbreviated Dr. for Dr. Patterson, and the abbreviation ends with a lowercase r, therefore it's capital D, lowercase r, period. Is that clear? Okay, I want to bring to your attention an anomaly. Patterson noted that, quote, periods and commas are always included in the quotation marks, period, close quote. The exception occurs, however, when we are documenting source materials in MLA or APA formatting, period. Open quotation. Whenever you draw on another's work, comma, you must also document your source by indicating what you borrowed, dash, whether facts, comma, opinions, comma, or quotations, dash, and where you borrowed it from. Notice that we close the quotation mark, we open our parentheses. The MLA handbook was written by Joseph Gibaldi up through the 4th edition, so I've included Gibaldi's name. The page number is 104 from where I got this quote. I close the parentheses, and then I have the period. In other words, in MLA and APA formatting, you include the parenthetical reference that identifies the source of the quote within the sentence, which is why that period moves over and picks it up, okay? So we do always include periods and commas within the quotation marks, except when we're including a parenthetical, and then the period comes over to the end. And yet there is another example. For short quotes, comma, the quoted material is included in the regular paragraphing, period. The parenthetical reference is included as part of the sentence, period. When using quoted material in your research papers, comma, it is important to avoid quoting too much material or material that is not of particular note, period. Open quote, this is Gibaldi. Quote only words, comma, phrases, comma, lines, comma, and passages that are particularly interesting, comma, vivid, comma, unusual, comma, or apt. Close quote, Gibaldi, period. When we are quoting longer passages, however, we throw everything we just set out. For longer quotes, the quoted material is block indented, and the parenthetical reference stands alone. It stands alone as part of the block indent, which allows the reader to understand that the parenthetical reference is attached to that block quote. Whenever you draw on another's work, comma, you must also document your source by indicating what you borrowed, dash, whether facts, comma, opinions, comma, or quotations, dash, and where you borrowed it from, period, and then parentheses, Gibaldi 104, close parentheses. We do not use a second period. That would create a fragment. Now, what do we mean by longer quotes? The Modern Language Association, MLA, says if your quoted material takes up to or more than 4 complete lines of text, you use a block indent, not quotation marks. I recommend to my students that you go ahead and type all of your quoted materials in regular paragraphing, and then when you're revising, you go ahead and check to see if that is more than 4 full lines of text, in which case you go in, take out the quotation marks, and use a block indent. APA format identifies a long quote as any quote with 40 words or more. So again, 4 lines of text, MLA is a long quote. 40 words or more, APA is a long quote. All right. Ellipses, often called the 3 dots in a row. We use ellipses to indicate the omission of words from quoted material. Quote, whenever you omit material. Notice, square brackets, dot, 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 square brackets, comma. You should be guided by 2 principles, colon, fairness to the author quoted and the grammatical integrity of your own writing, close quote, parentheses, Gibaldi, page 76, close quotes, period. The ellipses identify that you, the author, have taken something out of the quoted material. Noted I did the square brackets. We use square brackets to indicate an explanation or a comment that you, the author, have added to the material quoted from another author. Quote, this is a punctuation rule that they often have trouble with when learning about MLA rules. Close quote, parentheses, Smithy is the author that I'm quoting from. But the they is a pronoun, and I'm not quoting enough material for the reader to get the antecedent. So when I use the they, I then in square brackets put in the word students. Square bracket. The square brackets indicate that I, Patterson, have added this word to Smithy's quote, and I've done so to help you understand who they are in the sentence. They are the students. This is a punctuation rule that they, the students, often have trouble with when learning about MLA rules. What punctuation am I talking about? The use of square brackets. Parentheses, we use them a little bit more in APA and MLA when we are inserting a comment. Parentheses, particularly if it is a rather long comment, close paren, comma, use parentheses at the beginning and end of the comment. In other words, parentheses, brackets, and quotation marks are always used in pairs. When we're quoting, we open the quote and we close the quote. When we're bracketing, we open the bracket, we close the bracket. When we're giving a parenthetical statement, we open the parenthesis, we close the parenthesis. Quote, also use parentheses when providing a textual reference, close quote, open parentheses, Patterson, close paren, period. All right, let's talk about the colon. We use a colon to introduce a list. Now, when we were talking about using a comma to separate items in a series, I said when the series is 3 items or more. When we're talking here about the colon to introduce a list, what do we mean by a list? And the answer is 2 or more. So if you're going to be providing a list to your reader of 2 items or more, you can introduce the list with a colon. Every essay should contain 3 basic parts, colon, introduction, comma, body, comma, and conclusion, period. Okay, for my students, apostrophes are horrific. So let's go through this, and if you need to, if you're learning something new for the first time, don't be afraid to write it down and go back and review it again. I'm going to give you 7 apostrophe rules. Rule number 1, we use an apostrophe to form a possessive. Rule number 1 is to form the possessive of a singular noun, comma, add an apostrophe and an S, period. The example, Juan made it on the dean's list. Dean is a singular noun. We add an apostrophe S. Here is Maria's homework, period. The homework belongs to Maria. Maria is a singular noun. We had an apostrophe and an S. The student's book was left at home, period. The book belongs to the student. Student is a singular noun. We add an apostrophe and an S. I found the little girl's doll, period. The doll belongs to the girl. Girl is a singular noun. We add an apostrophe and an S. Apostrophe rule number 1, to form the possessive of a singular noun, we add an apostrophe and an S. Most students know this rule. Rule number 2, to form the possessive of a plural noun that ends in an S, comma, add only an apostrophe, period. And many of my students know this rule partially. In other words, we have a noun that is plural, and we've made the noun plural by adding an S. In the first example, those are the students' books. The books belong to the students, but student, a singular noun, has an S added to it to make it a plural noun, so that we are talking about more than one student. Those are the books that belong to the students. Those are the students' books. We have the S already there to form the plural noun, so we simply add an apostrophe. We need to collect the kids' toys. The toys belong to the kids. There are more than one kid in this sentence, so kid is a singular noun. We add an S to make it a plural noun, so to make it possessive, we only add an apostrophe. Meet me in the teacher's lounge. The lounge belongs to the teachers, all of them, and so we simply add an apostrophe. They are waiting in the boys' locker room. The locker room is for the boys, plural. We've added an S to boy to make it plural, number of boys, so we add simply an apostrophe to make it possessive. Okay, take a breath. Here we go. To form the possessive of an irregular plural noun, not ending in an S, add an apostrophe and an S. And some students stumble into this one because they know it's a possessive. There is no S, so they know to add an apostrophe and an S. To form the possessive of an irregular plural noun not ending in an S, we add an apostrophe and an S. These are irregular plural nouns. They're irregular because we make them plural, but we don't add an S. We rewrite the word. The children's area is in the back, period. Children is the irregular plural noun. The singular plural noun is child. But we do not add an apostrophe S to child because child is singular. This area is for multiple children. So we rewrite children. We add an REN to make child plural. And then to make it possessive, we add an apostrophe S. This is a class in women's studies. The studies are about women, plural. Woman, A-N, is singular. We make it plural by turning it into women, M-E-N, women. There's no S to make it plural. We've changed the way we spelled the word. So it's an irregular plural noun. So we do add an apostrophe and an S. And again, most students will stumble onto this because the word does not end in an S. Therefore, they will automatically or accidentally add an apostrophe and an S. Okay, here we go. Number 4. To form the possessive of nouns in a series, comma, add a single apostrophe and an S if the ownership is shared. So, when the ownership is shared, we add a single apostrophe and an S to show that the ownership is shared. In the example here, turn in Ana and Martin's essay, period. It's one essay. It was written by Ana and Martin together. They share the ownership of the essay, and they will share the grade. So there's one possession. It's shared. So we add a single apostrophe and an S to show that the essay belongs to both Ana and Martin's. We add an apostrophe and an S to Martin to show that the essay is owned by both Anna and Martin. Number 5, but if the ownership is separate, comma, place an apostrophe and an S after each possessor. So if I say turn in Anna's and Martin's essays, we're talking about multiple essays. At least one of the essay belongs only to Anna, and at least one of the essays belongs strictly to Martin. So the ownership is separate. An apostrophe and an S after each possessor. We're doing so good? Okay. We also use an apostrophe to form a contraction. Do not is contracted as don't, D-O-N apostrophe T. Cannot is contracted to be can't, C-A-N apostrophe T. Many of my students will write don't or can't without the apostrophe, and I immediately recognize that I have a student who speaks English but does not read English, because we don't pronounce the apostrophe, but we need it when we're reading. So please note that the apostrophe indicates that two words have been put together and at least one letter has been removed. This is a critical piece because in English we have what we call compound words. Homework is a compound word. It's two words that have been put together. We don't need an apostrophe. We use the apostrophe to indicate that two words have been put together and at least one letter has been removed. I also want to note that contractions should be limited. Don't feel that you need to avoid them entirely, but they should be limited in academic writing. Again, we're looking for a little bit more formal, a little bit more professional, a little bit more objective tone when we're writing for our professors at the college and the university. So we want to limit the contractions. The only people that absolutely must avoid contractions at all costs are the lawyers who are writing law. They cannot use apostrophes for contractions. Okay, this is what I was talking about. I cannot dance, period. Two words. But we have a compound word, cannot. I cannot dance, period. There's no apostrophe. I have made a compound word, but it's not a contraction. In the third sample, I can't dance. Now I have a contraction. I have can and not put together, and at least one letter has been taken out, in this case 2. I can't dance. I am standing at the screen, period. I am standing, two words together. That's wrong. That doesn't work as a compound word, so therefore it's wrong. Some students want to keep I am, but they throw in an apostrophe. I apostrophe am standing. That's also wrong, because remember, we're putting two words together and we're taking out at least one letter. So I apostrophe am, I'm standing at the screen, is a accurate statement, although it's false. I'm sitting at my computer. All right, apostrophe rule number 7 is the exception to rule number 6. It, the pronoun it. The contraction of it is, by rule, is it apostrophe s, because we're putting two words together, it and is, and we're taking out at least one letter, so we put in the apostrophe, it apostrophe s, its. But it is also a singular pronoun, a singular noun, so we would, by rule, need to add an apostrophe s to make it possessive. We do not add an apostrophe to its to make it possessive. Many years ago, the Modern Language Association did a really huge word search. They had over 1 million texts in computer digital format, and they ran through it, and they said, how often is its a contraction of it is, and how many times is its a possessive of it? And they found out that 95 to 97% of the time, its is a contraction. So they said, okay, that's 95 to 97% of the time. Let's stick to the rule of the contraction. It is its contraction, it apostrophe s. Let's forget the rule. For those few cases where it is being used as a possessive, we'll add an S, but we will not include the apostrophe. So, I wonder if it's going to rain today. As a professor reading your text, I will always read it's as it is. I wonder if it is going to rain today, period. That makes sense, so I need to have an apostrophe. Sears is having it is annual back to school sale this weekend, period. That doesn't make any sense. So it must be possessive. And it is. The annual back to school sale belongs to Sears. Sears is having its annual back to school sale this weekend, period. It is imperative that you return the dog to its owner as soon as possible, period. Well, that made sense with the first it's, so that's a contraction. It is imperative, it's imperative. That you return the dog to its owner, that does not make sense. It must be possessive, and it is. The owner belongs to the dog, just as the dog belongs to the owner. It's possessive, no apostrophe. It's, with an apostrophe, imperative, that you return the dog to its, no apostrophe, owner, as soon as possible, period. Are we done? No. Let's do some checking for understanding. The book belongs to Susie. Yes, it is Susie's book. Susie is a singular noun. We add an apostrophe S. Today is the birthday of Megan. Very good. Today is Megan's birthday. Megan is a singular noun. We add an apostrophe S. The car belongs to Jorge and Janina, period. Yes, it is Jorge, no apostrophe S, and Janina's, apostrophe S, car. Because they share the ownership, we have just only one apostrophe S. The toys belong to the child. Careful here. We have a singular child. So we add an apostrophe S. Those are the child's toys. One child. The toys belong to the children. Just to try and trip you up, the toys belong to the children. This is a plural noun, but it does not end in an S, so we add an apostrophe S. The toys, these are the children's toys. Here's one for you. The textbooks belong to Raul, Mitchell, and Francine, period. Dink, 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 dink. Yes, those are Raul's, apostrophe S, Mitchell's, apostrophe S, and Francine's, apostrophe S, textbooks, period. Very good. Okay, one last one, just to make sure you've got this. The textbook belongs to James, period. Think about it. Think about it. Many of us have learned, and in popular fiction and most books we see it printed this way, the authors simply add an apostrophe to James. But if your professor is wanting you to follow MLA or APA format, James is a singular noun, and therefore by rule it would be James's textbook, James apostrophe S. And when we pronounce it as James's textbook, we actually hear both S's. So James is a singular noun, and if the professor is requiring MLA or APA format, it's a singular noun. The rule applies. Apostrophe S is added. Any questions? Quote, when asking, quote, are there any questions? Question mark, close quote. The average teacher waits 3 seconds before moving on, period. The average student takes 8 seconds to formulate a question, period, close quote. This is quoted from Dr. James David Patterson, PhD. Now, I want you to point one thing out here before we close, and that is there is a quotation within the quotation. When asking a question, and then the question is quoted, are there any questions? So how do we punctuate this? Remember, punctuation clarifies sentence structure. How do we tell the reader that we have a quoted material within quoted material? And the answer is double quote versus singular quote, or on your keyboard, quotation mark and an apostrophe. So let me read it again for you. Quote, when asking, comma, apostrophe, because we're using it as a single quote, are there any questions, question mark, apostrophe again, to close the interior quotation. The average teacher waits 3 seconds before moving on, period. The average student takes 8 seconds to formulate a question, period, close the full quote. And then in this case, we've identified the speaker. All right, folks, I know this has been a long presentation. We've gone over a lot of material, but again, if there was new material in this presentation, do not be afraid. Take time and go back through this presentation again. Thank you, and good luck.